that we want to talk about when you're listening to your current customers is the risks. What if they don't listen to current customers and really operationalize goodness in that way?
Yeah, before we just jump to the obvious risk, kind of one of the biggest thoughts I had is if I'm not listening, if I'm not staying in that pursuit of the customer, somebody's pursuing my customer. And somebody's listening to their complaint. Somebody's listening to it. Or quite frankly, if they're not listening, they're actively telling somebody. And you know, in any relationship, and again, we're talking about business, but think about just kind of what inspires me about you, and I wish we would talk more about it at some point in time. What inspires me the most about you is just, you know, the fortitude, you know, the diligence, what new age, new era stuff would call hustle. I don't think it's hustle. I think it's, you know, principles that you've developed in your life, you know, and it's, you know, and it's transformed you, and it's very noticeable, you know. So, hey, Leslie. Hey.
Haven't seen, well, hold on, let me exit out of, I don't know, leave, no, I don't want to leave meeting. Okay, I can see you guys now.
Awesome.
Hello.
Hey, Leslie, this is our special guest speaker. So we'll give everybody,
good to meet you.
We're going to give everybody a few more minutes. We're just chatting.
Sounds good. Sorry, I was saying hi, but I was on mute. Hi.
Yeah.
I saw you waving.
Yeah. So, Father God, we're just so grateful for tonight. God, we thank you for what you're doing in and through us. God, we just ask, Lord, that you give us ears to hear what you want to speak to us tonight. God, soften our hearts to any area of our lives that you want to convict, and just give us the willingness to do as you ask us to do. And we just thank you for what you're having us do in business and the creativity, God, and what you're allowing us to do that, God. We give you praise in all things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I think I joined this group about a year ago during the summer, I think, of 2020, something like that. So I've started, I make toothpaste. And when COVID hit, I'm a registered nurse. My department was closed because it was elective surgery, and the hospital was freaked out. They didn't know what was going to happen. So they didn't want to start losing funds when they needed it, like for extra PPE and stuff like that. So I was laid off. And that's when I thought, well, maybe I should just start selling my toothpaste. And that's when I found this group. And you guys have really been an inspiration, believe it or not. So things are starting to happen now. And so I'm in the middle of the patent. The patent, I think, is going to end like early December. And of course, the attorney said, do not launch your website, do not do anything yet. But I have been selling my toothpaste, right? It's not like Colgate's going to say, let me take it. Come on.
Yeah.
Right. So then Patty used to come to the group here. I don't know if she still does, but she's the one that sent me a message saying, hey, she somehow works she helps out with an organization at a church in Colleyville, and they're having like their like vendors craft thing. And she said, why don't you come? So I'm actually going to do that October 23rd. Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. if you all want to come and try my toothpaste. It will change your oral cavity, I am telling you. So I'm doing that. And my daughter-in-law put my Instagram. I don't even know how to do that stuff. And we just kind of started on that. I think this last week, she's like, why don't you post like a video? And I did a quick video right after church, and just kind of informal. So I'm new at this with business and all that, but I have been in the last year just infusing myself with any social media business related, because it's not like I took business course. Okay. I know how to put Band-Aids on. I don't know a thing about business. I just know that my product works.
Yeah.
And so that's who I am. So I'm glad you're here, Rob.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Very cool. So Jordan, do you want me just to kind of start going freestyle here, or
Yeah, we'll just kind of
Okay.
play it by ear, and then normally what we do. So, like I said, why don't you just share for 5 or 10, just kind of give a background, just like Leslie, and then, if there's any questions, and we'll kind of go from there. And I kind of know where I want to lead you, so but just give us a
Okay.
background.
Fair enough. Well, I'm Robert, and Robert Allsup. So Jordan and I have known each other a long time. But no, so I've been in business for, I guess a lot of years. I started, so I graduated college from Dallas Baptist University back in 2002. My last couple of years of college, I was actually working because my wife and I got married, pretty young, at age 20 and 19, not recommended, by the way. And so I worked, I started, I worked as an independent agent for a small, or at a small insurance office for a big insurance company. I did that for a couple of years. I didn't really attach to it. I liked finance a lot, so I went to go work from there. One of the guys that actually worked there said, "Hey, have you ever thought about working in like investments finance?" And I'm like, no, but I need a job, so I might as well try it out. So I went to go work for a Fidelity Investments, and worked there for several years. Started out just kind of again, super entry level. I had no licensing, nothing at all, and started out there, kind of worked my way up. And after about 2 years, I got someone asked me if I'd ever thought about working in kind of their sales group, and I thought, okay, well, it pays a little more than what I'm doing now. Why not? And so I jumped over to that group and just did really well. And again, I think some of the things Jordan, was wanting to highlight maybe later, but kind of helped me out. So I did really well there. I kind of worked my way through a few different kind of sales rungs into different areas, and then I had an opportunity right after the market crash in 08, 09. Fidelity had a hiring freeze on, and I'd been wanting to kind of move into kind of a higher level, planning and sales role, and they just weren't hiring at all. So I had a buddy of mine who was working for TD Ameritrade at the time, said, "Hey man, you should come over here and work with us. We're smaller, but we're growing fast." And so I was offered a position there, and I went there. I worked at TD for about 10 and a half years, and did really well in my time there. And then right after TD Ameritrade was acquired by Charles Schwab, about, again, kind of during COVID, they were acquired at the end of 2019, but during COVID, some folks from Fidelity reached out to me, and they were asking me to come back and work with them. So it kind of come full circle, and working in that kind of a senior advisory role for Fidelity Investments now. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a certified financial planner, and I really just kind of help in different areas of retirement and investment planning. Sorry, my dog is trying to jump into the Zoom meeting here. But that's primarily what I do day to day for Fidelity.
Very cool. Well,
It is cool.
Yeah, and I know from obviously, I remember whenever you were at Northwestern Mutual, and I was in high school, and I came and interned for you and helped you crunch some numbers and consolidate some things and whatnot, and made me want to stay away from finance. All things, it was not my cup of tea, but
I share the same feeling. Finance numbers, just not my cup of tea. I'm glad I have people, surrounding me that are good with that. So that helps me, because not my thing.
Yeah. Probably my number one thing that that I think that I admire about Robert, and I know that every place that he's been at values about Robert is that I'm here to work, and there's not any fluff in regards to that. You're going to get my best effort, and probably more than my best effort. And it's funny how just putting in your best effort and coming to work brings the results that it does. And that's why I think sometimes when TD or Fidelity or ask Robert to share with the team, what's the secret? He's just like, I'm showing up and doing my job. I'm not taking 30-minute breaks and whatnot. But Robert, share a little bit about that, about just how that mindset has been cultivated, what maybe you've learned, maybe if there's an author or a podcast, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of that, I kind of would even trace it back to like our sports days. So like, if you don't know, Jordan was like the best at every sport he ever played. I wasn't, so I remember having to work extra hard, where, I mean, I wasn't the most athletically gifted, but I always did really well at sports because I wasn't going to be outworked by anybody. So I would stay for hours after practice to hit off of, machines. We were big baseball family, and that was just kind of what I did. And, at the time it was, I really wanted to be on the team, and I really wanted to not just be on the team, but excel. And in order for me to do that, I had to work, super hard. And I didn't think about it at the time as like anything special. I just thought about it as, hey, look, I want to be on the team. And, if I'm going to be on the team, I got to work to earn my spot. And so, kind of in the business world, again, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and even how I got into finance wasn't because I had like some desperate desire to be in finance. As a matter of fact, like when I started working for the insurance company, I mean, I needed a job. I had just gotten married. I had really no prospects for employment. I was always really good at math, and my dad suggested, hey, why don't you go into finance? And I said, okay. And so once I was there, it was just a matter of, now I have to learn about finance and learn this business. But, at the end of the day, and even now, like, right, so I've got credentials and designations, but I still wouldn't consider myself to be kind of the sharpest guy. But it's kind of about understanding, how just small things that you do every day can add up over time. Pastor Craig Rochelle, who I think is speaking at the leadership conference at Gateway yesterday and today, one thing that he says that I love is he says that successful people do consistently what other people do occasionally. And I think that is just, again, you can, that translates to any part of your life, where someone who has a strong marriage is someone who consistently feeds into that marriage over time. Someone who has a strong relationship with their kids is consistently feeding into those relationships over time. Someone who's athletically or physically fit, is not someone who works out once a week and eats hamburgers. It's someone who consistently, exercises and maintains their body and their health. And so in business, it's the same way. When I started at TD Ameritrade, I still remember this. It's the craziest thing, but in the training program we did there, they taught us something called the science of sales. Again, I was in a sales type role, and they basically broke it down. And the guy who led our training class, part of obviously sales is all about having conversations, talking to clients and prospective clients. And he said, and I remember this, he said, I can promise you, if you have 17 contacts or 17 conversations a day, you will not fail at this job. And I can't remember anything else I learned in that training class, but I remember he said, if you have 17 contacts a day, you will not fail at this job. So I told myself when I left that class, I will never walk out of this building without having 17 contacts in a day. Like, I don't care if I have to stay till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, I'm going to get 17 contacts a day. And I mean, for years, I worked there for, almost 11 years, and I never left the building without having 17 contacts a day. Again, I mean, sometimes I would have much more than that. Sometimes I would be grinding and making, extra calls to get to my 17, but I got it. And, other people wouldn't, they just weren't willing to do it. They weren't willing to do the work. So
that's really good, because you can tell, like I can tell, like those 17 contacts, who's got that drive and who doesn't at work. And it is like a work ethic thing. Like I also teach at Collin College. That's what I do now full time. And one thing I tell the students is, you can either be good at what you do or be outstanding. And I can tell the difference. And you see it. It's in the drive. It's in that, 17 contacts. And, that's so good. It's good.
Well, the other thing about that too is that, like people, when I was at TD Ameritrade, people would ask me to, hey, will you come speak to our branch or come talk to our team? Or they'd ask me to mentor somebody. And they would always want to know kind of like the secret sauce, like, hey, what are you saying, in your client meetings? Like, how are you converting so much business or, attracting all these new clients? And it's not any one thing that you say, but it's amazing. What I would tell people is, you like when you start out, like, like no one's good when they start out at anything, but the thing is over time, like, if someone else is getting 10 contacts a day and I'm getting 17, well, I'm having almost 50 more, or 35 more conversations every single week, and then just extrapolate that out. I mean, every month I'm having almost 150 more conversations a month. So I'm going to get better at asking the right questions. I'm going to get better at building relationships. My clients are going to be talking to me more frequently because I'm putting in the work and I'm being efficient, and you just learn how to do things and have conversations. And again, it's kind of that, it's just repetition. Just like, again, I think about it, like when I was in baseball, I could never hit a curveball until I would spend, all that time after practice, hitting off a curveball machine. And then it's after you see curveball after curveball after curveball after curveball, it just becomes routine. Like see curveball, hit curveball, and it's kind of like, I'm having more of these conversations. So the objections that clients might have or the concerns that clients might have, I know how to speak to that, and I know how to provide the right solutions for their situation because I've had that conversation a million times before. And that's what I would always tell people is there's no magic phrase, there's no secret sauce. It really is just about putting in the work and putting in the effort. And then over time, like when I first started, a lot of my conversations were not great, but and even now, with even though I transferred to a new company, I've got the skill set built where, like I'm now a lot of times the contacts that I'm making are I'm calling on referrals that, a satisfied client has provided to me so that I'm not making cold calls. I'm making warm, connections with people who were referred to me because of a skill set that I have and problems that I've been able to help other people plan for and solve for. So, I don't know if that's kind of what you wanted, Jordan, or if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah, and two things that I took away with that, and I love that Craig Rochelle quote. It's so good. But there's another one, and this isn't a quote per se, but he talks about how if you're wanting to make a drastic change, much like whenever somebody comes to Robert, and they're new to the industry, or maybe they got their Series 6 and 67 or whatever, 67, whatever it is, and they're eager and they want to be where Robert's at, and again, they want the secret sauce. Pastor Craig Rochelle says to look where this person is at and identify 10 traits and then hit each one. And so you're setting milestones to be, because if I try to be where Robert is in 6 months, I'm going to fail. If I said, I want to be where Robert is in 6 years, I may fail. But if I say every year I'm going to learn a new trait, well, then in 10 years, I may be, at a place to where I'm on my way there. So that's one thing Craig Rochelle talks about. But then, so if you want to touch on that, but then also, Robert, I wanted to touch on, because of your work ethic, because of I'm not leaving here until I get my 17 calls. How do you juggle that with, but I want to still, put in my quote unquote 17 calls at home? How do you distinguish that?
Yeah, so that, and that changes over time. But I would kind of going back to the first part of your comment, and then I'll at least give my perspective on the second part. But I think it's just, it kind of boils down to daily activities. Like one thing in trying to build in systems and routines. And I think that, COVID has kind of dropped a giant rock in the water for a lot of people with their systems and routines. I know it did for me, going from being in an office 5 days a week to all of a sudden not leaving my house, because all of a sudden my house is my gym and it's also my office and it's also where I live and where I sleep. So that was a little bit of a shakeup for sure. I think it's just kind of having those things that you try to do consistently, either every day or a certain number of days a week. So like for instance, one thing, and it's not huge, but I try to read at least one investment related article every single day. I'm talking 5 to 10 minutes, but again, that's 5 to 10 minutes every single day, every single week, every single month. And so that compounds over time.
Yeah.
I'll try to read, 10 to 20 pages of, again, depending on the season, 10 to 20 pages of a book. And then next thing you know, you got a shelf full of books that you've read, so it's just, we don't think about things like, and I fall into it sometimes too, where it's like, man, I want that. And I wanted it like 6 months ago. But the thing is, if you just start doing a little bit of work and then a little bit of work, and then it just sort of just, you look back after a year or 2 years and you're like, wow, I can't believe I've accomplished all that. But it's just a mindset thing of trying to not rush the process, but just own the process. And like James Clear is a guy who I like to read a lot. And he always talks about how success is in the process. So it's not necessarily in the destination or in the achievement of the goal. It's in the process that you use to get there, because once you achieve the goal, if you don't have good systems and good processes in place, then you'll ultimately fail. But if you can maintain good systems over time, you'll keep hitting new goal after new goal after new goal. As far as your second question, though, about kind of putting in the 17 contacts at home, like my kids are 20, 16, and 13. So that putting in the 17 contacts is a lot easier when they're really little, because, they're, it's easier and they actually want to hang out with you a lot, Now it just comes in different flavors. And, like I was telling Jordan, like my nights, I used to be consistently in bed between 9 and 9:30. Well, now with, everybody in my house stays up till midnight, so now I stay up till 11:30 or 12 at night, so, I'm just kind of reorienting my routine. But, it's just whatever. I've kind of learned over time that I just need to be flexible with whatever they want to do or whatever they like to do. So no matter how exhausted or tired I am, if, like I guess kind of a personal rule, if I'm dog tired or exhausted and my son says, hey, do you want to throw the baseball? My answer is yes. So it doesn't matter. Like there's days where I'm out front in a shirt and a tie. Like the other day we were doing bench press in the garage and I was wearing a business shirt and a tie and I had slacks on and I'm spotting him and then he's spotting me. And it's just kind of into like my girls. I'm super uncoordinated. So they like to watch me dance on TikTok. So, I mean, that's kind of another rule I have, is anytime they ask me to do a TikTok video, my answer is yes, no matter how ridiculous I look. And so it's, again, nothing magical, but those are some of the funniest times, just kind of rewatching, my awkwardness on TikTok. And their friends love it. So now all their friends, when they see me, hey, Mr. Robert, so anyway, I just, try to be available, and I'm not perfect at it. Certainly not. I'm sure there's times when they want me to disappear because I'm annoying, or I have to, be strict dad, but I just try to make sure that I'm available, and even if it's if it's 5 minutes, that's 5 more minutes than 0,
Yeah.
I guess that makes me think too of, there's a guy named John Acuff who I like to
Yeah.
read a lot. I got exposed to him. He's funny. He's,
Yes.
again, he just writes about productivity and stuff like that. But, he wrote this post one time about how he had a goal to run 3 miles a day. And one time he just, meetings ran long. He couldn't do it. And, he said he had, I can't remember if it's 15 or 20 minutes. And so he was like, well, I'm just not going to run today. And then he said he stopped and he thought, and he said, well, what would be better, running 1 mile, which is about what he thought he had time to do, or running no miles? And he said, even though his goal was 3, he knew that 1 was better than 0, and it would keep him, on a track of running every day. And I kind of thought about that. I mean, certainly I'd rather spend an hour with each one of my kids, having deep, life-altering discussions every night of the week. But 5 minutes doing a TikTok is better than no minutes at all. So that's kind of it's kind of where my mindset is around that.
Yeah, that's great. So everyone who's just kind of jumping on, we're going to give a recap real quick. So Belinda and Sumesh, it's great to see you and to have you with us. Today's we have Robert. He's a VP with a large financial firm here locally to DFW, and so he's just kind of sharing with us a little bit about that. And so I had a couple of questions, but Belinda, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick, just like 30 seconds, and then Sumesh, we'll have you do the same. You're muted, Belinda.
I'm Belinda Figum from Justin. I'm a dog groomer, and I also board animals. I'm a mom, a grandma, and a doggy mom, and a wife, a big animal lover. I have 36 animals. So that's my life.
That'll keep you busy, I think.
Oh, yeah. Very.
How's your husband doing?
Well, the last time I was on, he had a toothache. Yeah. Well, they wouldn't do his bone marrow because of his toothache. And he was really upset about that, but he's in the midst of getting his tooth fixed, and he has to have it pulled. And the doctor that was going to do his bone marrow said that he wants him to also get his back fixed and his neck problems. So they said it doesn't look like surgery. He's really PO'd right now.
Okay.
So
we'll chat more about that at prayer time, just because we only have Robert for a little bit more time. So we'll get that here in a minute. Sumesh.
Sure. Hey, hello everyone. My name is Sumesh George. I was a senior exec with a retail company till July, in between jobs now, looking for my next mission. Been married 17 years now, 2 boys, 15 and 13. What else? That's about it, I guess.
Okay. Well, Sumesh, you had some really insightful questions and insight a couple of weeks ago. So I know that you're going to have some great insight or questions for Robert here in just a second. But Robert, picking back up, so we do a daily devotional every day. The Gateway Business Group does, and we actually probably have anywhere between 30 to 50 people who do that devotional, not necessarily in sync every day, but they're traveling through the devotional at some point in time together, which I think is pretty incredible, men and women. And yesterday's devotional I thought was so on point for today's conversation because it just reminded me of you. And so let me read you this verse and what it says. Our devotional is the 14 success principles found in Job. And so yesterday's was number 9, and it said no gloating or pride. And it was Job 31:25. It says, if I have rejoiced over my great wealth or the fortune my hands have gained, and then it goes on to ask God to do something. But then it also gives us the Amplified, and it says, if I've gloated or rejoiced because my wealth was great and because my powerful hand alone had obtained it. And so with the Amplified, we get the heart behind it, that Job is saying, if I've gloated or rejoiced because of something that I've done, because if it's me who's doing this, not because of you, if I'm gloating and I'm gloating about you, that's okay. But if I'm gloating saying it's me, and then it also followed it right up, and I'm going to let you give some thoughts after this with, and this one, I love this verse, Deuteronomy 8. It says, you may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands has produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors, and it is to this day. Thoughts, Rob?
Yeah. So no, in those, so here's the deal, right? So I am like, my MO is, I'm super introverted. I don't like, I don't mean this in a bad way. I just like to be by myself. I like to be, quiet. Like, again, you can see, like, this is like my little cave. Like, I'll come in here and shut the door and read. Like, I literally would be just fine if I could go, I could go days without talking to anybody and I'd be in a happy place, And so my wife and I laugh all the time because literally what I do all day, every day, and what I have done all day, every day for years and years and years is talk to people. And I tell her, like, every day that I come to the office, I am so uncomfortable, almost like nauseous, like anxious, that I know, okay, I have to talk to all these people today. And, and again, I really do. And I've told my kids this before. I'm like, it is completely, God's hand that opens doors, that puts me in front of the right people at the right time. That gives me the courage to have conversations and to do that, because again, that's not my personality, to just talk to somebody who maybe I've just met and ask them really deep questions about their personal financial goals and situation. That's just not, but again, it's just completely God's hand. And so, I feel like, I don't know any other way to say it. And that's like, and I'll tell people that, like, I don't have secret sauce. When I get asked to speak at these branches, I'm like, are you sure you want me to talk? Like, I don't have anything special to say. Yeah, it's special to say, I just do what I do. And, but, I don't know if it's, I just recognize that it's not my might or it's not my power, but it's God's spirit that opens doors and does what it does. And so one thing that kind of, this is like a passion that drives me. Like, I'm not, I do well financially, but it's not about that. One thing that I remember, like, when my wife and I got married, like, I literally, the first year we were married, I made $19,000 working for that insurance company. And I just remember that. And like, we've struggled struggling to pay bills and stuff like that. We were super backwards on our finances, and we continued that way even after I got a job working in, at Fidelity. I mean, I didn't know how to handle money. That was not something that our parents really taught us about a lot growing up. And so, I mean, we had credit card debt, I had student loan debt. And it wasn't until 2008, when the bottom fell out of the market, a lot of my income I was making at the time was on overtime, working, at Fidelity, doing what I was doing there at the time. And like all of our overtime got cut. And it was kind of like that old quote from Warren Buffett, where he says, it's not until the tide goes out that you find out who's swimming naked. And I realized at the time, like, hey, my process is super broken. Like, I'm not making enough money to pay all these bills that we've built up. And so somebody introduced me to Dave Ramsey at that time, not like physically, but to his writings and teachings. And so I made a commitment, like, hey, I'm gonna learn how to do this the right way. We started budgeting, we started living below what we made, and we paid off our credit card debt, we paid off our student loans, and then it was amazing. And we started tithing. That was when we started tithing very regularly. And and then God started opening up financial, doors of opportunity for me to, move into new roles with Fidelity, and then to get that job at TD. And I'll never forget, the day that, we looked at our kind of tithe statement that we get from the church for the year. And I recognized that I tithed more in a year than I actually made the first year that we were married. And it was just, God, like, that was kind of the moment where I was like, this is not me. Like, that $19,000 a year was what I was able to do in my own strength, but by the grace of God, and just, again, the doors that he's opened, I can't explain it, but I just know that, honoring him with my time, being faithful to my employer, again, not stealing. That was one thing I learned from Dave Ramsey, which he talked about, if you're at work and you're surfing on the internet, you're stealing from your company. And so I made a commitment when I read that in one of his books. I was like, I will never get on a personal website while I'm at work. Not even at lunchtime, I wouldn't do it. Like, I would see guys sitting back, they're eating lunch, so they're obviously on their lunch break, but they've got YouTube up on their computer. And I would never do that, because I never wanted to put off the perception that I was doing something like that on a company device, on company time. I wouldn't do it. And Jordan, you brought up something earlier, but when I would go to work, I would tell people, like, I like, again, I want to be friendly. I want to be cool with people around me at my office, and I'm willing to help anyone at any time. If you ask me for help, I'll help you. But, I'm here to work. I'm not here to shoot the bull and talk about the game last night or any of that. Like, when I'm at my office, I am at my office. This is my opportunity to serve my clients. My company is paying me to be here. They're not paying me to have cooler conversation or, any of that. I have a commitment to my company, to my clients, to be available and to serve them, and then, so that's just kind of my mindset, I guess.
Yeah. And one thing that just reminded me that it kind of correlates, and this is really where I was thinking last night after we had our discussion, and I was rereading the devotional, and it just really kind of struck me about Job's perspective about, because we all know about Job, and this Job 31 comes well after he's lost everything, and he's reflecting back, and he's telling the other men who are with him, that that wasn't about me, and this is not about me, and but it also reminded me at the same time about Joseph, and I text Robert this last night, but I just told him, that he reminds me so much of Joseph, that he learned some lessons and he's grown so much, but in that moment when Pharaoh says, hey, it's you, come here, you've got a gift, you've got ability, and Joseph's response is, interpretations belong to God. I'm happy to ask, I'll be a conduit, but don't look at me. and I see that same, trait with Robert. Obviously, if you're listening, you can see that. But Robert, what about, today's culture nowadays is all about, I need a personal brand, which I love personal branding. I talk about it all the time. But how can I, keep that steady of, God needs me to be a light, but I'm not the source of that light, kind of correlating all this together. He needs you to be the light in your organization, in your industry, but also be able to throw it back and say, anything that I have belongs to him, came from him. It's all because of him.
Well,
because that's not culture related, right? Culture says, look at me, I did this, it's the whatever show. It's about, I did this, I've accomplished this. This is, more notches on my belt. That's what culture nowadays says you need to be like, Wolf of Wall Street, that kind of stuff.
I don't see, I guess my perspective on that, and maybe it's just my introverted nature, or, but I really think that the more you shine the light on yourself, the Bible also says that pride comes before the fall. And I just figured that, the people who always drove me the most nuts in sports, and Jordan, you probably remember this, were the people that would brag and brag and brag, because I just wanted to take them down. It was almost like they were putting a target on their back, because it's just like, when you do that, I feel like you're just kind of setting the stage for your own failure, Now, again, and I'm not saying, there's obviously a lot of very godly people who have very large platforms and are super influential. But again, I think they're, again, with those particular people, they're going to be that, they're going to reflect the light, not try to be the light. And so I just, I've always kind of had the mindset, like, if, God will open the door, and if he opens the door, then that's my kind of, again, and I'm a very driven person, but I want to be sensitive to, like, when is it me pushing something versus when is God opening the door and I'm walking through. And I find that a lot of times, like, and I'm not saying, like, I still struggle with these things now, like, to where, but normally it's like, if I'm pushing, and I'm getting frustrated, I'm not seeing results, and I'm getting mad and I'm getting angry, normally I'm like, okay, like, this is harder than it should be, because, and then I have to stop and reflect and say, God, is this me trying to do this, or, am I pushing after something that you're kind of directing me to? And again, I've never really had a desire to be like the, hey, look at me guy, just because I've seen too many instances where the, hey, look at me guy gets kind of knocked off the pedestal. In our industry, you mentioned Wolf of Wall Street, but I read about it all the time, where, such and such, person at this firm, gets cited for this or that. And, again, they have a big practice, so they had success, but ultimately it found them out. And so I've always just kind of had that mindset of, it's a matter of time, if you're not doing it the right way, before, the rug gets pulled out from under you. And then everything that you did for all those years, nobody remembers any of that. They remember the big goof. And I just don't want to be the big goof, because then I look at that and I say, okay, then all those people that I've kind of shared with about, God, and he's the one opening the doors, now they're questioning that, like, hey, was this guy did he really have the level of integrity that I thought he did? And to me, that's more important than, any sort of spotlight or any sort of award or kudo. Like, none of that matters to me if I can't look at my clients and say, hey, look, I did the right thing by you,
Yeah. Anybody have a question for Robert?
I was just gonna say, for someone that you say you're would like to kind of stay behind the scenes, I have written so much of what you have said. You have I think it's like you have integrity and honesty, and that's what we lack today. And I think you are kind of, you guard your testimony, and I think that's beautiful because you're absolutely right. There, I see so many things even at work. As a matter of fact, yesterday I went in to do some stuff, and then the two people were talking at their desk of how they could not show up at work even though all the instructors are off for the winter break, but office people still have to go in, how they can do it so they won't know that they're not showing up at work. And that really bothered me,
Wow.
right? Because there shows, what you said, stealing from God, stealing from your employer. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm like, should I move? But that was my desk. What do I do? Do I say something? And then they turned around and asked me, well, don't you think that's unfair, Leslie, that you guys get off, but yet we don't? I'm like, yeah, I said, a lot of it has to do with, when they hired you, what was written in your duties. I don't know. Everyone's are so different. I was like, what do I say? You thief. But
Yeah.
anyway, I hear your heart, and you have something that's very rare in today, and that's the honest truth, Robert. I'm so glad you. I took some good notes, and on some I had to say, ouch, like, when you said stealing from your company, your employer. I'll be honest, I've sometimes at work, I not now, but with the time comes, it's like, oh my gosh, my son needed something and wanted me to text him something. And during work, I've done it quickly and then put the phone back in, but that tugged at my heart. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Belinda or Samesh, you got a question for Robert?
I think you're
Go
on
ahead,
mute,
Belinda.
Belinda.
I'm good for now.
Okay, thanks, Samesh. Belinda, you got a question? You're still muted. Let me help you.
Unmute.
There you go.
Okay, so are you talking about like being that I own my own business, my employers are my clients? Because I'm a dog groomer. And so if I go online, I go online a lot because my business is Facebook, a lot to do with Facebook. That's how I advertise. And is that what you're talking about? I'm stealing from God when I do that?
No, what I was referring to is, whatever you're, and again, this is something that I learned from Dave Ramsey. He talks about it in his Entree Leadership books and his Entree Leadership, podcasts and speeches that he does. But, it's really whatever your job duties are. And again, I applied this to me. So I think everyone's got to kind of look at what they do. Like in the role that I'm at, I don't get paid to be on YouTube. I don't get paid to be on Facebook. Or my company, that's not what they hired me to do. They hired me to meet with clients and to develop business for the firm. And again, when I'm at work, if I'm not doing that, then in my mind, I look at that and say that I'm stealing from my company right now. Like if I'm, if I should be, prospecting or making outbound calls to try to develop clients or set appointments, and instead of doing that, I'm on ESPN.com checking my fantasy football, scores or leagues or doing that kind of stuff. I mean, any of that, I can now, again, texting your son because he needs something. I don't know that would be, I wouldn't consider that to be stealing. That's just, obviously taking care of your family. But, again, if I'm stopping down and, having a 30-minute conversation with my son in the middle of the work, and I'll tell my kids, like when I'm at work, I turn my phone off and I put it in the drawer, so if they need me, they need to either call my office phone or email me on my work email address. Otherwise I won't see it, and again, I tell them like, hey, like this is like, if I'm at work, if you're reaching out to me, like, it better be important. Like, don't message me and say, man, my math teacher's such a punk or something like that. Like, you can tell me that tonight when I get home, you know? So again, it's just, you know, I try to look at it from the standpoint of what is my employer paying me to do, and am I doing that? You know, and then the personal stuff, if I need to handle some of that at lunch, or, you know, if I'm, you know, between meetings and, you know, I see that my son texted me and he needs something for football or something, then I can, you know, message him back and say, hey man, I'll be there at 5:30 or something like that. But I mean, if part of what you do is kind of communicating through Facebook and all that, I don't know that I'm not the judge and the jury on any of that, but I don't know that I would consider that stealing if it's actively, you know, increasing the, you know, the enterprise.
Yeah, I just advertise a lot on Facebook, you know, my grooming, you know, I'll look for stuff and put on my page, you know, just to keep it going.
Yeah, Belinda, I think for you, and again, not knowing your business in and out, if you told somebody, you know, you could drop your dog off at 2 and pick him up at 3, you know, and I'll have your whatever you're paying for your service done by 3, but then when 3 comes around, you're not done because you were on Facebook,
Yeah.
you know, checking your personal stuff, not Belinda dog groomer stuff, then that's where Robert's talking about. Then that customer who's now having to wait until 3:15, 3:30 to pick up their dog, that person is now, that's where you would be effectively, quote unquote, stealing from. And it's from the employer. When you first asked the question, you said from God. You're not stealing from God. The employer is the one who's paying you to do that job. And so,
I see.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's a good parallel, Jordan.
yeah. And so really, you know, I want to give Robert just a couple of minutes to kind of summarize kind of any thoughts that, you know, the Holy Spirit may be giving to him to share with us, kind of a final thought. And then, as always, you know, we're going to cut all the live and the recording and go into our prayer time, you know, for our businesses and families and things like that. Robert's going to leave us at that time because he's got some other things that he's going to do with his family and things like that.
I need to go make TikTok videos.
That's it.
My
you know, that's important. Yeah. That 5 minutes adds up. That's what we talked about, you know. So
I've actually got to go pick up my son from his football game. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Did you want me to go ahead and summarize, Jordan?
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we covered a lot, and I feel like I meandered a lot, which is pretty typical of any conversation that you have with me. But I think the big things with me, and this is something that, again, yeah, I mean, it never stops, is just kind of focusing on your daily processes. And I mean, again, you know, it's just a constant evolvement, because for me and like my business now, it's not 17 contacts a day because I'm in a different role and I'm in a different season, you know. So it's really just kind of determining what is the end goal? Like, so what am I trying to accomplish? And then understanding that the way that you accomplish whatever this giant end goal is through the daily activities that you're taking, and then trying to break it down, but then evaluating too, right? Because if I say, hey, to get to this goal, I need to do A, B, and C. And then after a quarter, I realized, okay, hey, this, like, I wanted to go here, but I'm going here. Like, so it's just course correcting. And that's part of why, like I mentioned James Clear earlier, he talks about how success is in the process. And it really is just kind of in those daily activities that lead to that direction that you want. So I would just say, kind of, if I could summarize everything, it would just be to focus on your processes and don't give up, because, you know, you're if you're still breathing, you know, then there's hope. So just course correct, you know, try to figure out, get some outside perspective. Maybe ladies don't have to do that as much, but us guys can be pretty bullheaded, and we'll ramming our head into walls until somebody points us in a different direction. But get outside perspective on things, but focus on the processes that are going to lead to the outcome you want. And I mean, I think, you'll find that leads to a lot of success, regardless of what you apply it to.
And I have one final question, and I'll let you make it as short or as long as you want, and we'll let your time in there. But what is something, because I know God's working on this with me, is how can I make sure, aside from just doing quality work, how can I make sure that I'm not leaving him out of business, out of my business day, out of my whatever that looks like? How can I make sure that he's being invited in, that he is a part of what? So what do you do? How do you bring him in?
Yeah, so I mean, I would love to say that I have conversations, like micro conversations with God all day. And there's some days where, I do remember, like before I go into the meeting, God, I really need you to help me in this meeting. But I mean, to be honest with you, again, and I do try to be cognizant and reflect on that, when I'm kind of in between meetings, just kind of taking a deep breath and thinking, did I do my best, in kind of reflecting on that and kind of using that time as a quiet time with God as well. But I think, when we talk about bringing God into the business day, the way that I've always measured that is, am I honoring God with the way that I interact in my business day? So I'm not a pastor or anything like that, so it's not like I'm preaching all day long. But can people see God through the way I do my work, through the integrity with which I with which I operate my workday? So here's a quick example. There was an opportunity a few years ago where it was when I was with my prior firm. A client called me, and it was a very, very good sized opportunity. Like, that would have been, I mean, I could have made a lot of money on it, and I could have, by all rights, I could have, transacted and worked with this client because they called me. They were transferred to me from another group within our firm. But when I pulled up the client's account, I noticed that somebody else from my branch had already had a conversation with this client about a week and a half before. And it looked like it was a very brief conversation. It didn't look like they had really gone into much. And the client even said as much. But I told him, I said, hey, look, she's out of the office right now, but let me do this. I'm going to get your information. I'm going to talk with her. I said, I promise you'll be her first call tomorrow morning. And, and then I passed this information on to this other representative. And she told me about, and so the funny part of that is I led this particular department, I don't know, like 15 out of 16 quarters. And the one quarter I didn't lead that department was because I referred that opportunity to her. And it was a large enough opportunity to where, I mean, she actually edged me out for that quarter. But she told me a couple of years later that, she had always kind of wondered like how I had success and stuff like that. And she said that, people would talk and say, man, Robert's doing something, there's something he's doing, or, not being ethical or whatever. And she said that after that interaction, that she never questioned my integrity, and that anytime anyone else ever brought up, whether or not I was operating ethically, she would immediately shut them down and give that example. So it's just things like that where it's like, I just try to evaluate through the lens of, is this right? Can I be proud of this decision, later on down the road, And if the answer is yes, then I feel like, hey, that's how I'm honoring God, and that's how I'm keeping him involved in my workday, And I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but
no, it's a great answer. And that's part of the reason why yesterday when we were having a text conversation, I just said, you have characteristics of Daniel, where, in this moment, what's setting Daniel apart is just his, I'm going this way. And same thing with the Jewish boys. And I think that's an example there where God tested you, and, you did well. So we want to thank you, Rob, for being here and for sharing.
Yes.
And so we're going to let you go get Harry and finish your TikTok dances. We'll all be looking for those later on.
They'll go viral.
They will go viral. We'll look on News 8 and see you on there. So, but thank you, Rob, for sharing.
Yeah,
so we appreciate you.
My pleasure. It was very nice to meet all of you. And Jordan, thanks for the invitation, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, brother.
All right. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Some of you know on the Howie and Beastmode podcast that we come from a faith background. So we love business, strategy, growth, and execution, as well as career development, but we do come from a faith background. And although we don't overtly talk about that as much, we actually have something that's pretty encouraging that Beastmode shared with me today that I thought we should just share with all of you that happens to have a faith and business aspect to it. Beastmode, what do you got?
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit in our prep about gifts, and you have a particular gift that God gave you, a foresight, seeing things in advance. But some of you may have been given a gift of wisdom or knowledge, boldness, whatever it is. And oftentimes we can use those giftings outside of for